We might ask ourselves, as we've just heard this proclamation of the gospel, what is the parable in the gospel really talking about? I think at first glance, it sort of sounds like instructions on agricultural methods in the early ancient time in Palestine. I suppose that would be interesting. As a city kid, I could care less. As long as I can get it at the market, it's fine. And I admire those that work hard in the fields. But it would be interesting perhaps to study that. But I am sure Jesus wanted to teach something more challenging than that, because that's what he did in parables. He used the things that the people could quite identify with, and then he zaps them with a real strong teaching. I think that's what he's doing today in this parable. I think he was using this parable to remind us that what our role is in spreading the kingdom of God. Through our baptism, we were consecrated to share in the ministry of Jesus by spreading the good news of Jesus' love and compassion. Those are the seeds that we should be spreading. Jesus certainly felt it was important that certain harvests come out of the seeds that were spread. I'm certain that Jesus wants us to make our marriages grow and deepen and make them more life-giving. He certainly wants our children to grow and to mature, to become responsible adults and faith-filled Christians. He wants us to grow in our faith and become faithful followers of the gospel. He wants to see the world grow into a place where the poor and the alienated are helped, and where all life from conception to death is honored and cared for. Christ really desires that. And I think, too, we wish for that same kind of growth as we try to plant the seeds of faith in our families, in our communities, in the places that we worship. But like in the parable, no matter how many seeds are spread and no matter how honorable our intentions are, we are not always successful. The harvest doesn't seem to come. But we should not get discouraged. Faithfulness is much more important than any success. We are not in control of which seeds will grow, which seed will not, because we cannot always determine where the seed will fall. But it is our mission to keep spreading the seed of our faith. I think the people of Jesus' time hearing this parable could really identify, because in Palestine at that time, they were given portions of land, but it wasn't the best land. And so in order to hope for any kind of growth, they literally had to spread the seed all over. And as you heard, it sometimes falls in roads, and sometimes falls there. You might say, isn't that a waste? To waste all that good seed? Just plant it in one place. But they were so hungry, they were so in need of their produce that they spread it everywhere in the hopes that something would come up and they could bring it to harvest and take care of their families. And so the seed is always good. The difference lies in the ground where the seed falls. And so we too must not stop feeding and spreading the seed. Even when it seems that maybe our young persons and our families rebel against us, or when our family has a discord or some kind of need for reconciliation, when maybe the unborn are not protected, the poor are not fed, and the environment is not respected. And so in spite of all of that, we must continue to spread the seeds of peace and reconciliation, justice and love. Many of these seeds may not take root, but the few that will produce a great harvest. Only God can bring to us the harvest, but the harvest cannot come unless we keep sowing the seed. And so I would just suggest, what are the good seeds that needed to be planted today? And where should you and I be scattering that seed? I think We're called to scatter the seeds of forgiveness, to scatter those on those who are seeking reconciliation and healing of relationships. We're called to scatter the seeds of compassion on those who are seeking comfort as they deal with serious and terminal illnesses. And you all know those people. They might be in your own families. You may be suffering from that. Or those that are alone and in need of encouragement and company. We need to spread that seed of compassion. We're called to scatter the seeds of hospitality to those fleeing violence and oppression, to those who are rejected by society because of their immigration status, where they come from. We're called to scatter the seeds of peace so that there will be an end to violence and conflict in our world. We're called to scatter the seeds of patience to help all become more tolerant and understanding of others we disagree with. And we're called to scatter the seeds of hope, to help all of us to never despair and always know that we are never alone and the Lord will bring forth the harvest. As I enter into this new relationship with you, the people of Our Lady of the Lake and at St. Anne, I look very forward to scattering seed with you. As I told you in my letter in last week's bulletin, I come to you to continue building on the wonderful and strong foundation that Father Joe and all of you have passed on to me. And I come only to serve you, to work with you, to learn from you, and I hope very often to pray with you. I will try my best to follow the advice that I find in 1 Peter in the New Testament, chapter 5, verse 2, where he says, "Tend to the flock of God that is your charge, not by constraint, but willingly, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not as domineering over those in your charge, but being an example to the flock." And I also pray that I may carry out the mandate of Pope Francis that he gave in a sermon to some newly ordained priest in Rome. And I quote, "You will gather others into the people of God through baptism, and you will forgive sins in the name of Christ and the church and the sacrament of penance. Never tire of being merciful. You will comfort the sick and the elderly with holy oil. Do not hesitate to show tenderness towards the elderly. Remember then that you are taken from among people and appointed on their behalf for those things that pertain to God. Therefore, carry out the ministry of Christ the priest with constant joy and generous love, attending not to your own concerns, but to those of Jesus Christ. I pray that you and the Lord will help me to achieve those high ideals."